show you all the things you have forgotten. The things you have forgotten. It wasn't so long ago we all danced around the fire, telling stories to the children, laughing with their wonder. Mama rocks, remember who you are. Don't let them bring you down. If you could only see the way we see you still, the magic is in your heart. Your destiny will carry with you in the arms of a mother. It's simple, don't you see? The question was always the answer. Hey mama, let us give you all the dreams you have forgotten, lost amongst the memories of the things you desire. The power of a smile made stronger with your laughter, with your laughter, with your laughter. Mama rocks, remember who you are. Don't let them bring you down. If
Oh, yeah. I'm back. 2024. I did a kind of pseudo after New Year's show, but this is my first interview. Going to be tonight. My brother Tom Hampton joining us again. He's got some new music that he released. That's a track that he did some haunting slide guitar on. We kind of started it on the tail end of the pandemic, and it got released a little over a year ago. Tom is a guy I've known for a few years now, and in my own personal story, was the person that got me to really pick up and start playing again. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on tonight. Got my brother Jonathan Phoenix, my brother Ed Contini in the house. Since Ed's in the house now, I'm going to do the good and the bad and the ugly thing. We got a couple of shows that we do over on Rochester Free Radio, WRFZ. Ed does Thursdays 3 to 5 p.m. over the Edge. Sundays he's got with Brian Judah, the Rock show. And Friday morning's coming up soon. It's going to be me, Ed, and Brian. Brian is the good, Ed is the bad, and I, of course, I'm the ugly. But we love each other, making music together through the wolves and doing stuff through the radio. And then, obviously the podcast where I can kind of go a little bit outside the box and not have to worry about language and stuff, but to just take care of that little particular element. And again, special thanks to Brother Judah for keeping me in line, as they say, because sometimes, we need other people to remind us the little things that we have to be cognitive of. So I'm just trying to see. I don't even think there it is. Here we go.
The following program contains coarse language, a lot like real life. Viewer discretion is advised.
So yeah, there it is. It's the infamous Yoko Ono disclaimer trailer that we run constantly just because listen, I believe in an old school dynamic of freedom of speech. I know my brother Tom does as well too, but we have to be cognitive of other people. So I want to give people the fair warning. Yeah, there's going to be some F-bombs. The fuckity fucks are going to happen. Who knows what else may come out in the dynamic of that language. Coincidentally, I got my brother Chris Miller out in the audience. He was there personally for that first jam session over at Teresa DeSeo's way back in the Rocks, Ribs, and Ridges show before Charlie Daniels died. Chris Miller had kind of brought us in and introduced us to Marshall Tucker, and that was the 6 degrees of separation that brought us to people like Charlie Daniels, Tom Hampton, Artemis Pyle, and a bunch of others. So yeah, Chris is one of the guys that was actually there and can speak to it. He's a witness, as they say. I see my sister, the Oracle's out there, and hello to Eileen and everybody joining us, streaming worldwide. And again, as mentioned, Tom very graciously did that slide guitar for Mama Rocks. And, it's worth noting, and I've seen this in a lot of the write-ups on Tom over the years, Tom is really highly regarded as a slide pedal steel guitar player. And, I got to tell you, I've heard a bunch of people, and it's not that they're bad, but Brother Tom, he brings a different kind of depth to it. He plays from his soul, and that's not something that can be taught. I'm not even sure it's something you can fucking learn. And, again, it's not to say that other people are less than. And one of the things that always comes up in the bios and the write-ups about Tom is he just has this incredible humility. He's not one of these ego characters that, thinks his shit doesn't stink or, doesn't have a connection back into the real things that go on around us. And a lot of his music is reflective of his experiences, of his feelings, his beliefs, his perceptions, and all that. And he constantly makes it a point to lead by example. I've said this a lot, and I'll continue to say, words without action don't mean a fucking thing. You can get a parrot to recite scripture. Yeah, what is that at the end of the day? They're just empty fucking words. Tom Hampton is one of those guys that brings an honest dynamic to the equation. But again, I'll let him fill in those blanks personally. Couple things I want to throw up there. Coming up this Saturday, my brother Brian Judah and his band Days End are going to be playing up here, Rochester, New York, over at Pineapple Jack's with Bobby and the 4-Speed. It's going to be around 8 o'clock there. It's a cool little place here in Rochester. And also going on that Saturday earlier in the day, let me just slide down here to the promo. And I don't even know if I have the damn thing, but I'll throw this one up because it gives you the address for Mythic Treasures. It's going to be the Mythic Treasures Mystical Fair. It's a little something that Sue has been doing for a number of years for the magic community. It's a free event. It is going to be, again, Saturday, January 13th, over in the Tops Plaza in Jefferson Road in Henrietta. It's a free event. My witch, Lady Shia, will be over there doing her thing. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool people, great vendors. It's a great way to, check out some different stuff on the Saturday afternoon and meet some really beautiful people. So again, this Saturday, January 13th, we got Mythic Treasures during the day, and then 8 o'clock over at Pineapple Jack's, Brian Judah, Days End. It's going to be kicking it. Me and my brother, Ed and Shai, are going to be over there supporting it. Special shout out to our sisters, Tivia and Diane. Lillian, known as Emporium, will not be there this Saturday because Tivia's daughter has a gender reveal party going on. So much love and much support to her and her journey. And I know Tivia and Brian and everybody and Tony are really excited about having the newest addition to their family hit the ground running. So a lot of really cool stuff. I'm going to keep it simple tonight because I really want to just focus mostly on Tom's music and his journey, but I do have a couple of other live acts from local here that fit within the genre style of that kind of folk, Americana, rock. One of them is the Matt Seidel Band, and the other one is Deb Mogoni, and I'll play a couple of their tracks a little bit later. So let's put this, and again, I'm going to throw this in here because I know brother Chris will remember this. This is from Teresa's. That's myself, aka Witch Short Hair, with that old Black Alvarez acoustic of mine. Tom Hampton there in the middle, and brother Joe Boogie there on keyboards. And we had a little impromptu thing one of the nights during the Rocks, Ribs, and Ridges Festival, and it was those interactions and conversations with Tom that convinced me and Chris Miller to get back into music. Yeah, it was a great time, brother, wasn't it? A lot of great memories. Really cool time, really great people. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we dance on through the evening. And there, put Tom back up on there. So, again, and just as a full disclaimer for tonight, we have been under the gun with this crazy storm that's been ripping across the East Coast. We had a couple of little power fluctuations before. Tom and I contemplated maybe, pushing this off, but it seems to be holding. But if we do get shot down, we'll do our best to come back. And if not, we'll come back next Tuesday night. But from the old school dynamic as musicians, the show's got to fucking go on. And sometimes you got to deal with the technical shit. Sometimes you got to deal with the weather. Miller remembers we had some funky rain that weekend, and we just refused to let it, shut it down, and we had a blast with it. Granted, running into Walmart soaked to our fucking bones to try and find dry clothes was an adventure in its story in itself, but I'll have Miller back out one day and we'll talk about some of those old stories as well as some of the old Tucker dances back in the day. So I'm going to go to one of Tom's videos, okay? And this is a little thing that he put together. And it's a really interesting track. It's reflective of some of his personal experiences back in the day. And he understands better than most, the analogy of the small club scenario. Most musicians cut their bones in, little bars and places along the way. And they carry a lot of really powerful, great memories. Some of those places are no longer with us. But I thought it would be cool to give a little bit of snapshot of Tom's world while I go get him on the line, and then we'll come back and we'll explore the new music he just released and some of those fucking crazy stories. So this is a little ditty called Uncle Tom's Cafe, and then we'll be back live with brother Tom Hampton. So hang in there.
Here beneath the big steel trap, the breeze hangs in the air. A little while the sky turns bright. Tonight we'll all end up down there. The lights go up, the songs begin. Music plays and your friends file in. Everything here's just the way it's been. It's just another day. Tonight we'll all get up and play at Uncle Tom's Cafe. Faces painted on the wall, people circled round the bar. You hear the rumors rise and fall. It reminds you where you are. All the conversation the song withstands. Feel your hero slipping through your hands. You wave goodbye to your best laid plans. So soon they fade away, but you can still get up and play at Uncle Tom's Cafe. Used to waste away these nights, tossing dreams into the air. And all this time that you spent down here, it's only memories in. These nights are falling early now. The wind's picked up a chill. We all must walk upon this wire. We all end up where we will. Now the music's playing just like before. But your friends, they don't come around here no more. You wonder just what you do this for. Never thought you'd see the day when all good things go away. Uncle Tom's Cafe. You know these moments fade away, just like the dimming of the day. We could all get up at Uncle Tom's Cafe. Uncle Tom's Cafe.
Okay, so yeah, we're back live. I got brother Hampton here with me. We got Chris Miller out in the audience as well too. He actually came out to check you out. He was there with us back in those original Rock Ribs and Ridges show with Tucker and stuff. So Tom, say hello to everybody here in the Wolf Pack and going across the world now.
Hello, Chris, and hello, everybody else. You know, that's been a decade ago now.
Yeah, I know, man. Fucking time's flying. Hey, listen, get your first. You have the right now to use the F-bomb, so get your first fuck out of the way, just for posterity's sake.
Oh man, well, my favorite, I guess, conjugation of the verb is T-Bone Walk, the guy that played bass in Hall & Oates and was in the Saturday Night Live house band for years and years and years. I heard him use it first, and I've been using it ever since, just in the spirit of keeping it alive for him. Is, oh, for fuck's sake.
That's a beautiful thing. You know, you say what you want about the online dynamics. In some ways, it's like the old Wild Wild West. We don't have a lot of structure and laws. Granted, it's a double-edged sword, but just for the simple framework of communication, having an open, honest conversation. You and I are big fans of that George Carlin dynamic, that we shouldn't be afraid of fucking words. We should be afraid of the actions behind said words, you know, depending upon whatever ridiculous narrative it may be. But I don't think anybody ever died from an F-bomb getting dropped, you know, versus an actual bomb getting dropped on your house or some shit like that.
Yeah, I think that profanity is a human construct. I don't think that, you know, words are just words. It's how they're used that give them meaning. And people who are, you know, terrified of seeing the human body naked or you know, things of that nature kind of painted us into this corner to begin with.
Well, it goes back to the same old narrative that, you know, because somebody else has an issue with it, somehow it's got to become all of our problems. Now, don't get me wrong. Neither one of us are suggesting that, hey, we should bring pornography into, you know, grammar schools and expose 5-year-old children to it, because that's not what we're saying. But like most things, it's context. You know what I mean? And to some degrees, it has obviously been warped, be it, you know, from everybody's uncomfortability. Like, we used to be able to talk about comedic elements and satire. And now if you say one off word, people lose their fucking minds, man. They go completely sideways with it. But we've also embraced a new age of, you know, the whole flat earth, alternate reality type of thing where, you know, there is no checks. I don't think there's any more checks and balances, at least versus how when we were growing up.
It's amazing how the whole thing got twisted, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
You know, the internet and having immediate access to all of the knowledge, you know, within the human, you know, you would think that would make us smarter, but instead it's had the opposite effect.
I think it's made some of us smarter. I think it's like most things, you have to kind of put in your own work to it. It's there, it's available, but they're just the raw tools, the raw resources. You still have to take them and do something with it. But like you said, we have now created this kind of vacuum where, anybody can say and do all these things within one end of the spectrum. But if it crosses over into something where, maybe, it's not a popular opinion, or, especially within the framework of things like sexuality or religion, it's become so polarized that, if you even talk on a particular thing, you're either a racist or a communist. And you and I dance within both ends of the spectrum. We have friends who are conservative, and we have friends who are outright fucking hippies. And it's always been, at least within our circles, about what you do, who you are. It didn't matter if you believed this or that or the other thing. It was how you handled itself. It was how you interacted, what you did with other people.
Well, and that's how you should be judged, as far as I'm concerned, is how you carry yourself when you walk through your days on this planet. There are other people who don't feel that way, and that's fine. I've gotten to the point where I kind of feel like I have to, and I've tried to impart this on my kids too, all three, the adults and the little one, is that, you kind of have to go out into the world and choose your tribe. And, it's unfortunate that you can't just kind of go out and abide by the golden rule and treat everyone the way that you want to be treated and expect to be treated in kind, because it doesn't work that way anymore. You just kind of have to, you have to circle your wagons and surround yourself with people that you trust and people that make you feel valued. And that's how you have to live out your days now.
But there is still a beauty, and I'm starting to see it pop up a little bit. I'm not sure if you're starting to see it, but there is a movement towards some of the older dynamics. Like you and I both have exposure to the bluegrass scene. And,
oh yeah,
that element where you can just bring all these different musicians and people and families in. And it just was these beautiful, great community elements. Everybody, if you were thirsty, you had something to drink. If you were hungry, you had something to eat. It didn't matter to the degree of your skill level and stuff. You had all these just interacting groups of people with music and fellowship and family and love and, the occasional drunken, where am I going moments, but you get where I'm going. It was very inclusive. It wasn't about, you can't be here because of this. It didn't matter the color of your skin. It didn't matter, what God you believed in, again, as long as you weren't, running around trying to fuck a goat, as long as things were within narrative. And I remember those years very fondly as a kid, and it's where I learned how to play music. And there was a sense, I think, within old Americana and bluegrass and stuff like that, the way it was passed down. And you and I talked about this on the radio show. It's an element that we lost. Everything kind of became sterilized and, became more of this commercial product versus, the raw, natural element of just making music. I'm
sorry, I had you muted there because I didn't want to get any noise in the way of the conversation.
That's okay. I was just talking about, the old school bluegrass.
Well, no, I heard. Okay. I heard everything you said. I had myself muted so that, I was running the ice maker and making myself a drink, and I didn't want that to be an obstacle, but now I've talked about it. So there it is. But, you can make the argument that Woodstock was basically one big bluegrass festival. It had all the elements. It had, music and people and food and mud, because the Lord knows, the elements always tend to raise their, to make themselves known. But, to your point, I think that, there are people that are going out into the world musically, that are just doing what I'm doing, which is just kind of creating their own tribe, and however large or small it is, that's your congregation, and that's who you preach to, and you exchange information with them, and if it grows and swells up and everybody's on the same page, that's great. But I kind of think the days of there being, Springsteens and Bob Dylan's and people of that nature, I think those days are probably behind us. I think that there's, probably 10,000, Springsteens on a smaller scale that, that go out and play and make a living playing and none of them were on the cover of Time and Newsweek at the same time, but they're just out there plying their trade.
Well, there's a new cycle. Obviously, commercialization has kind of reached, I think, kind of a zenith with, how some of the A-list acts are just continually forced down people's throats. And, a lot of the better bands, we'll use Tucker as an analogy. Doug and the guys are still out there doing what they do. But Doug made it a point that he refuses to do shows that will go beyond a certain price point or creates an environment that he doesn't want associated with him or the band, and it takes a lot of courage to basically say, you know what, I'm not going to take the fucking money. I'm going to hold, to my principles, but it does also make it more difficult. You played with a lot of people over the years, better than most, all the things that go into trying to put together shows to get, venues and everything that goes along with it and all the logistics of getting there and setting it up and breaking it down and, all that aspect is forgotten. Most people, hey, they go to a show, they see people play, maybe they have a couple of beers, they have a pork sandwich and they go home and they don't think anything else. And it's gotten very difficult. I mean, your new music, you're producing all your own stuff.
Yeah. And, it's a lot more work. And, the mental anguish is definitely a lot greater because you're making all your decisions yourself and you're not really getting feedback from a producer or, in my case, even an engineer. I'm down there. I've got, everything set up in the studio and that's what I was doing all day, literally up until you called. I just finished comping bass tracks for, I went through and did a bunch of drum stuff earlier in the week. And now I'm going through and recutting bass tracks because the bass tracks that I put down before I put the drums on didn't really sync up the way I wanted them to with some of the stuff I came up with on the drums. It's you're toiling in obscurity and just kind of beating your head against the wall and, second guessing every decision you make. And was this the right thing to put on this, or should I put this on there? Or is it too long? Should I have taken a verse out? And, it's just this giant rabbit hole that you sink into. And I don't remember where I heard this, but I've heard it on multiple occasions that, no work of art is ever finished. It is only abandoned, meaning that, at some
exactly
point,
right.
You just kind of throw your hands up and you're like, you know what, this is not going to get any better. This is done. It's as done as I think it's going to be, or it's as done as I'm willing to make it. Or if I keep pounding my head against this thing, I'm going to go insane. But I'm trying to be with this particular record. I'm trying to, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if I were making this record, it would probably be done by now because I've always been a big believer in just, the spirit of, whatever the original vision of the song is, that's what it should be. And if you happen upon a happy accident, then leave it in there. I'm trying to be a little more careful with this record, just at the place I'm in my life. And, a lot of the themes of this record, some of the songs, are, these are not, teenage love songs. These are songs written by somebody who's eligible for membership in AARP, and who's, taking stock of their life and
but
who's
listen,
looking around.
We're still younger than Keith Richards, so we're good, man. Until that motherfucker dies, I don't think any of us have a problem at this element because you see them out there still doing it. You know what I mean? And it gives me hope. All joking aside, music, and I'll use the analogy when we met all those years ago, music saved me in many ways with the encouragement that you and Chris Miller and Chris Hicks and Doug and a lot of people are like, yeah, you need to go back to this. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It doesn't matter how you do it. And we tend to get lost, especially when we're caught up in life. You and I are both parents. We've had to dance from a couple different angles over the years between maintaining, the personal family dynamics and trying to, find some way to incorporate it within our music. which is not an easy dance in any shape or form, but it's also surviving, the everyday stupidity and whatever else is going on, from any particular angle. So, it's not always conducive, especially when you're trying, to be authentic. And I know for you, your journeys have taken you through a lot of different elements along the years, not only with Marshall Tucker, but obviously with Poco and, now with the new stuff. I titled tonight's podcast, The Road South, because I thought that really, I think in some ways reflected for you, you know what I mean? Because it's one of those things that you can put a couple different spins on it. What is the actual, I guess, translation? What is the narrative or even the story behind The Road South?
Well, that particular song, I wrote that song sitting in a sweaty apartment on the third floor of a walk-up row home in Reading, Pennsylvania in August of 1997, because my manager at the time called me and said, they're doing a compilation record. One of the record stores in Philadelphia is doing a compilation record for Christmas, and they want it to be all, Philadelphia-based artists, and they want a Christmas song. Can you write a Christmas song? Well, first it was like, can you do a Christmas song? And I'm like, dude, no. If you want me to come up with something, I'll try to write something that fits the bill. But no, I am not singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." I'm not,
No, that's great, because I get it. There's certain things. It's like somebody asking you to go up there and, play Freebird. It's just like, don't ask me to do it. As a guitar player, it's almost humiliating to the degree, unless I'm playing with Artemis or the surviving members. You see where I'm going? It's just one of those things that's sacrosanct. You just don't want to go there as a guitar player.
Well, I mean, we live in a world where Freebird has eventually become "You Are My Sunshine." It's just part of the American songbook. It's, you can hum, the first few bars of that guitar solo, and, somebody will raise their eye and look in your direction as if to acknowledge, yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're doing. It's just, it's part of the fabric now. And everybody would probably love to write a song that is that much a part of the fabric. I don't have any problem with, getting up and playing Freebird, but the Christmas thing to me at that point in my life, more so than now maybe, but at that point I was just like, the Christmas record is the thing that everybody does to try to cash in, to try to, to make some money at the merch table. It seldom felt real or authentic. It was just like everybody makes a Christmas record at some point, and it just felt gross. I was okay with participating in this thing, but I was not going to do, Frosty the Snowman. I was not going to do anything goofy, because at the time I was just starting out. I was just really starting to get, some notoriety or attention as a singer-songwriter. And the last thing that you want to do when people are just starting to figure out who you are and what you sound like is to throw them some kind of curveball like that, to go and do like, an album of traditional Jewish songs or something like,
but like you said, it's the money grab. It is the low hanging fruit, and it is that one dimensional, hey, you know what I mean? Let's see what we can squeeze out of it. And
yeah,
I agree with you. It's rarely authentic.
To do something like that early in your career just, feels like, it feels like it's diluting the message, and, you're going off script. So I told him that I would write something, and I would write something that night, and I would make it, so, going back to, my hero, Dan Fogelberg, who, one of my favorite songs that I ever hear at Christmas is Same Old Lang Syne. And that's not a Christmas song at all. It just took place at Christmas. So I'm like, okay, there's my blueprint. I'm going to write a song that takes place at Christmas, and that way it'll be a Christmas song and it'll fit on the record. So I had gone when I first came back to the States from when I was in the military and came back. I went with my first wife back to my hometown, and, we drove the whole way, 14 or 15 hours. And, there was snow on the ground when we left, but when we got to Tennessee, there was no snow on the ground. And I kind of started with that. And I essentially just kind of wrote a song about, going back to my hometown, which I have, some not so great history with, and just going back to my hometown with somebody that I was in a relationship with and showing them around, but not telling anybody that we were coming, just going and having it just be about me and the person I was traveling with, and just go back and this is where this story happened. And this is where my brother got pulled over by the cops for throwing a dime bag of weed out the window of the pickup truck. And because, you tell people stories about, who you are, and then showing them the place where the stuff all happened. It's, it's a different layer of the onion. And that's where the story kind of came from. It's like, okay, so this much about me. I'm going to show you, I'm going to take you on a tour of, this is where I come from. This is, for better or worse, this is where I come from. There is, to this day, there is a little cinder block. I hesitate to call it a house, but it was a place that we lived when I was a kid. And it essentially looks like, I don't know, to my eyes now, it looks like it should just have an outdoor toilet in it. It should just be an outhouse. It's so small and it's covered with graffiti, and I can't believe it's still there. But yeah, I grew up under some pretty crappy circumstances. So, to take somebody back there and to be vulnerable enough to show them stuff like that,
it's not an easy thing to do, especially again, if it still has meaning, if there's a memory attached with it. I went through a little bit of that when, I kind of, danced through and, went back to some of those old things. And it does, as a musician, as a songwriter, those moments tend to be much more powerful because they're, like you said, they're authentic, they're real, they're born of actual experiences, actual emotions and stuff. So I'm assuming that track never made it onto that compilation album because you're releasing it now.
No, it made it on. We recorded a version of it, and it went on the record, and it's the only song of mine that you can find on Spotify. I've managed to keep all my material off Spotify all this time. That's the only thing. If you go to Spotify and look for me, 2 of the tracks from the Cimarron 615 come up, but that is the only song credited to Tom Hampton that is on Spotify, and it's because it was on that compilation. But what I did with this one, the one that you have in front of you, it's a new recording. The old recording kind of felt thin to me in some ways. And, I wanted to do a recording of it that was a little more fleshed out and had a little more fidelity. And that's what I did. So I recorded that because my first solo record came out a little over 25 years ago. And I started pulling demos and alternate mixes and stuff from that record to do kind of a deluxe reissue edition of that. And I recorded a new version of The Road South to be part of that package. So that's where that came from. The notion of re-recording that one came from going into this, deluxe edition of Our Mutual Angels. That's
so you literally brought it full circle around and redid it the way that, at least with your perception now, that you felt it needed to be done.
In a way that it would fit more with the rest of the material on that record, yeah.
Nice. All right. So listen, we're going to play that track real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other tracks and some of the stories there. Let me find it right here. Here we go. Yes, The Road South. So this is the first time it's being played out here. You released this, not even a week ago, right?
I put that song and one other song up on Bandcamp just as kind of a Christmas present to the people that actually care about this stuff. And I put it out, about a week ago.
Cool.
About something like that.
All right, so let's put it out there for everybody else, and then we'll be back.
All right, thanks, man.
Now the colors have all come and gone, and the air is cold and dry. I know they say that you can't go back home, Now I feel like I should try. It's 1,100 miles one way, back to Savannah, Tennessee. If you could find the time to get away, maybe you could go back there with me. We could watch the sunset through the glass and stay up talking through the night. We could drive down straight into the past. Could be there before the light. Here at home, the snow is falling down the way it will this time of year. Further south as you drive out of town, seems to slowly disappear. Now when we're there, I could show you around, back through the stories that you've heard. Nobody has to know that we're in town. We don't have to say a word. We might find the footprints in the snow. I left here so long ago, when this was home, I never knew this road is leading me to you. Now it's Christmas on the radio, and the bags are in the car. I guess it's almost time for us to go. Now my home is where you are. It's where you are.
So yeah, that was The Road South, just released by my brother Tom Hampton. We were talking a little bit during the track, and we were going to segue back into it because both of us have a mutual distaste for a lot of the pay-to-play services out there, and we were taking our jabs at Spotify. And you know, the irony and the running joke now is you know, what are they going to do? We produce and promote and engineer and do all of our shit. You can't cancel us. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way you can shut down the type of organic stuff that we do because we're not fucking beholden to any of them.
Well, you know, I understand why Spotify exists, and if it were run, you know, in a manner that at least pretended to be altruistic, it would be a totally different thing. But you know, the CEO of Spotify is a billionaire. You know, he made more money during the time that song was playing than you and I will see all year long. And to pay people, 0.00384 cents per stream is just patently ridiculous. And they know it. And everybody knows what the con is. It's just, if you want to, if you want to be considered, if you want to feel like you're playing on the same field as everybody else, you kind of have to participate in it on some level. But I've been, if Peter Frampton will go before Congress and testify that, Baby I Love Your Way got 12 million streams and he got a check for $700, I'm never going to see Baby I Love Your Way kind of numbers. So it raises the question, why should I play the game at all?
Right. It's almost pissing in the wind. You're just feeding the monster under the illusion. And it's kind of like the American Idol analogy that, somehow, this is going to translate and work for me. And it tends to be, that weaponized narrative. We see it in politics all the time. Politicians be talking bullshit and people will vote against their own economic interests. They'll vote against their own social interests. They'll vote against, the health and safety of their children. Like, hey, fuck it, let Exxon poison the water because we have to have a viable stock market. And it's just like, whoa, we need to step back and, kind of refocus it. But it is unfortunately part of how the machine works. And I know for you, at least, you have made it a point to, maintain your own integrity with it, whereas still, trying to make it a viable, life element for you. Because, again, you got a family, you got kids, it's not like, you're running around hanging out in the Bahamas right now, drinking Mai Tais like, oh, isn't life great? You still got to take out the fucking garbage and do all the things that quote unquote us regular folk do. But you also make it a point to put it out there for people. And a lot of times, let's be blunt, people don't have the same kind of voice. So when we have an ability, to talk about a dynamic or put something out there that isn't just based on the almighty dollar, I think it's a better karmic thing. I know for you also, too, in your experiences, and we'll jump into a little bit of this, you were originally, working with POCO, and then the pandemic came, and that was going to be, for you, one of those, kind of bucket list segues, and then everything went to shit for you.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. It wasn't like you had any control or did anything wrong. It was just the universe is just like, yeah, well, no. So why don't you tell folks a little bit in your own words about how that kind of all transpired? Because it does segue into the other elements, what you had been doing for a while now with George and stuff like that, and, taking him into your home and taking care of him. I know now that he's, in a more viable assisted, living situation. But you were one of the very few people that actually stepped the fuck up and said, you know what, something has to be done. And you didn't just talk about it and, put up a Facebook post, oh, we feel bad. You brought the guy into your home with your family and took care of him.
Yeah, for most of the calendar year last year. He moved in at the very beginning of the year. And, initially my thought was, because it was supposed to be a temporary thing from the outset. And it was always meant to be a temporary thing, because the initial plan was that his daughter was going to be moving, and that they were going to find a place big enough to take him in. But for whatever reason, that got deep sixed at some point, and it became obvious that wasn't happening. But my thought was, this guy's been sitting, in a recliner at home watching TV, going out for Mexican food every so often, while he still has some of his faculties about him, and he still remembers people, he still, he remembers old things. Like, he could be watching a TV show and he gets completely lost if it's something he hasn't seen a million times. So one of the rules that we had to institute was we're only watching stuff he's seen before, because we would try to watch stuff he hadn't seen, and it was it was not good because he couldn't remember what had just happened, things like that. But I wanted to, I mean, this guy was one of the original members of a band that I loved from the time that I first knew anything about music at all. And, it just felt to me like an opportunity to actually give him some experiences. We went to Philadelphia twice. I took him to Philadelphia with me, for both times I had shows.
I remember you were documenting some of that stuff and putting it out there as kind of like a a video photo journal to, create some more, context for, people that were still fans and who actually did care about what was going on.
Yeah, there's a whole George photo album on my Facebook page. But, we went to Philly a couple of times. I took him to Muscle Shoals to do the studio tours. The day that it became obvious to me that, this was probably not having the effect that I had hoped it would, George was a huge fan of Joe Morello, who was the drummer in the Dave Brubeck Quartet. That was his guy growing up. He was his drumming hero. He was his idol. And we would sit and watch, Joe Morello stuff on YouTube. And eventually he'd kind of, he'd grow a little impatient. He would just want to watch a movie. So, that part of his personality was kind of starting to go away. But the guy who took George's place in Poco, George Lawrence, lives in Memphis now. And he gives lessons at a drum shop in Memphis. The owner of the drum shop has one of the cymbals from Joe Morello's drum kit, the one that he used to record Take 5 with, which was the first million-selling jazz album in RIAA history. And I found out that he had this, and I made arrangements, through George and through the shop to take George up to see this because it was in the store. It just wasn't on display. It was in the back, kind of with the rest of the guys' memorabilia.
Right. You have to protect that stuff. Right.
So I took him to Memphis with me. It's a 3-hour drive from Nashville to Memphis. Took him to Memphis. We grabbed some lunch and we went to the drum shop. And I took him back to see the cymbal, and I was recording it with my phone and the whole 9 yards. And I know how I feel when I'm in the presence of something like that. If you took me into a room and handed me one of Stephen Still's D45s, one of his Martin acoustics, or if you took me into a room and there was, one of David Lindley's lap steels or, something like that, that stuff resonates with me and with most other musicians in a certain way, being in the presence.
Oh, especially if you know the history of it and if it had any impact or influence on you. Like I know for me, my mother turned me on to a lot of the older folk. She was the one who got us into the bluegrass and the old time country music scene when we were kids and stuff. And, didn't quite appreciate it exactly because, our perspective as kids is just that. But it's where I learned how to play guitar. And a lot of my ability to play was born out of learning from those old timers. So like you said, there's certain little things for us as musicians, using the Stephen Stills analogy, you and I are both huge Buffalo Springfield fans. So yeah, something like that comes down the pike, it's like the Holy Grail.
Well, yeah. So, if you imagine, how you would feel if you were in the room with, Bill Monroe's mandolin or Mother Maybell's Gibson or, or something like that. None of that registered. It was just like he just kind of looked at it on the wall like it was, for sale with the rest of the cymbals out in the store. And it was lost on him, where he was. And that's when it first kind of started registering to me that most of those parts of him, are kind of lost to the ages at this point. But, I did as much with him and as much for him and as much, to try to make some memories to stick around in there as I could.
Oh, listen, I had been following some of that stuff and, it got a little bit weird because, people started, coming at it from different angles. There was some court bullshit type of stuff. And, we don't have to go deep into it. But the one thing that I did see reflective was that you were one of the few people that actually did step up to do what was right. There was no ulterior motives. There wasn't any other thing besides your connection to Poco and you feeling compelled that, like, how do I ignore what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? And
Well,
that tends to happen. You know, we lose the narrative because of an association, a name. You know, Polko obviously is a famous band, you know, from back in the day, but George was still a fucking human being. You know what I mean? He wasn't just, you know, a face on the album cover.
well, you know, George, and you and I've had these conversations, but George had a stroke 20 years ago. It is now. And, you know, that stroke left him with some cognitive issues. And now that he's older, he's going to be 77 in a few days. Now that he's older, you know, with Alzheimer's and dementia and some of the other, you know, layers of the cake that have come up, you know, just within the last couple of years, because, you know, we went to Wildwood in 2019 and then again in 2021. You know, after Rusty passed, we went and had kind of a memorial, and George and I rode up together and actually sang along to the radio, and I was posting videos on Instagram.
No, I remember that. Yeah.
Country rock carpool karaoke. But just the decline from then to now is pretty stark and pretty serious. And, you know, his wife, Debbie, isn't getting any younger either. And she was struggling.
Right. She's got her own medical issues. Right. Yeah. She was public about that as well, too.
And it got to the point where she literally, you know, she moved from the house that they lived in for, you know, since before they were married. They sold that house and moved in with her sister in hopes that would help, you know, they would, because, you know, her father is still alive and her sister is taking care of her father. So they thought, if we all move in together, we can take care of Dad and George and it'll be helpful for everybody. But, you know, taking care of George is just such a heavy lift that, you know, it eventually got to a point where, you know, he's hard of hearing, for instance. You know, he's had hearing aids in the past, but he either loses them or doesn't wear them, or they get lost or broken or whatever. And those are expensive to keep replacing when they, you know, get broken out of negligence or lost or whatever. So, you know, she finally gave up on that. So he would watch TV at insane volume levels all hours of the day and night. You know, and things like that, you know, especially when you're older, they take a toll.
Yeah.
They start to, you know, that sort of thing starts to become cumulative. You know, he would come in the morning and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and it was almost comical. I mean, my wife doesn't think so, but it was almost comical. He would come in and he would just frantically scrub the blade of the knife, you know, after he made the peanut butter sandwich. But then there would be little globs of peanut butter all over the handle of the knife and all over the handle of the sponge and all over the handle of the refrigerator. Like he would leave a trail of fingerprints with peanut butter everywhere as he was trying to scrub the blade of the knife. Yeah. It's nobody who's, the only way to really fully realize the depth and the breadth and the amount of time and effort and expense it takes to take care of somebody like that, the only way to do it is to do it.
Well, I mean, our systems aren't really designed to do the right thing. And we both know, and my mother's commenting out there, it really is. It's heart-wrenching to watch people fade away. But it's also, let's be blunt, especially within the dynamics of dementia and Alzheimer's, it is a progressive shit show. There's no way around it. It's not pretty. It's challenging, and you have your own family. You have a son who's on the autistic spectrum. You had your own dynamics. So, you had to juggle not just the obvious things, but everything in your life. And I remember, watching it and, talking a little bit back and forth about it. It wasn't, like a picnic, like, oh, wow, I get to hang out, with, this cool rock and roll person type of thing. George basically, unfortunately, was a shell of what he had been. And most people around him, and again, we're not going to point fingers or name names. Most people didn't give a shit. They just didn't, and that really was the narrative and how it kind of came full circle to you. And, that has been mentioned, and a lot of people talked about this, reflected of your character. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't something, again, that you can bullshit your way through. You put the everyday work in. Your family made the everyday sacrifices to take care of somebody, for all intents and purposes, didn't even know who the fuck you were anymore, probably.
It was getting to that point. Yeah. There was a night in, I believe it was late October. He hadn't really eaten that much on Saturday. And on Sunday, I finally said, look, we're going to go out and we're going to grab something to eat, get dressed. And again, this is late October. Now, this is a guy who took his coat with him everywhere we went, all spring, all summer. And we went out to go to Waffle House, and he was wearing very, very high shorts and a blue tie-dye t-shirt. The t-shirt was long enough that it looked like he was wearing nothing but the t-shirt. And he insisted that he was perfectly fine to go out like that. It was, like I said, it was late October already. But at any rate, we went out. He was very quiet. He ate his normal amount of food, but we got home. And, when you walk up the driveway to step up onto the porch, there are 3 small steps there. And he went, he would always, I would always come around, open the door for him, and he would grab one arm and we would walk up, and he would hold onto my arm when he stepped up the steps. He went to step up the steps and he didn't raise his foot high enough, and he didn't fall. He just kind of tripped himself and he kind of spun. He was still holding onto my arm, but kind of his center of gravity spun around, and he kind of spun backwards and ended up sitting down on the step. And I couldn't tell at the time because it was dark, but he cut his leg up pretty good. So the next day he got up, and I saw what had happened because I could see that it was scratched up, but we just, we cleaned him up and put him to bed. But the next day, and I called his daughter in Washington, and I said, we had a little incident last night. He really needs to go to the hospital, and he's probably going to listen to you more than he's going to listen to me about this, but he's got a couple of pretty deep gashes on his leg, and we need to take him to the hospital. So she lit into him pretty good and convinced him he needed to go. So we went to the emergency room, and, emergency rooms as they are, they take forever, but we got into the emergency room, and, he was, they had already put him through the stroke protocol to make sure that he hadn't had another stroke, or to make sure that, doing all of like the emergency checks. But they got him into a room, and the doctor came in, and, George was already ready to go home. We'd been there for like 6 hours, and he was ready to get out of there. And the doctor came in, and he said, Mr. Grantham. Yeah. Mr. Grantham, it says on your chart here that you're confused. Are you confused? He's like, no, I don't think so. I'm not confused at all. I said, good. Can you tell me where you are? And his face just went blank. Granted, he's sitting in a hospital bed addressing a doctor who's holding a clipboard. He's got a tube in his arm. But that was not enough evidence for him to process to figure out where he was. He couldn't tell him what year it was. He knew who the president was, but he thought it was 2 years ago. He just fell short of every cognitive pitch that they threw at him, and they essentially took me outside and said, we're going to keep him overnight because he's dehydrated. Which is shocking to no one that knows anything about his diet. But we're going to keep him overnight, and tomorrow you're probably going to hear from a social worker because I don't think he's going to be able to come back home with you. He was able to, as long as all that was really required of us was to attend to his daily needs and make sure that he took his pills, things of that nature, everything was fine. But it was getting to the point where there were mobility issues that were coming into play.
Oh, yeah. And listen,
some of the other stuff.
It's a lot of stuff that, requires a constant 24-hour, 7 days a week type of dynamic, which is outside the box. Because, again, up until, not that long ago, and again, we were just talking about it, and you were posting, some of your guys' adventures. I know you guys would, go out, and there'd be, a picture of George with, a plate of some, guacamole and, some other, of the things that he loved and stuff. So he was still functionable to a degree. But again, the progression, once it turns that corner, there isn't anything that, most of us can realistically do. And especially in the framework, again, you have a family and everything like that. I know it wasn't an easy decision for you, but I think ultimately it was probably the best one because, all it would take is just, that missed moment and, something horrendous happens.
Well, the whole impetus for doing it was that, the option at that point in time, a year ago when it was, he has to go somewhere, the option then was that, he ended up going into a nursing home of some sort. And the reason for him coming here was to keep him out of a place like that, because again, at the time, the understanding we had was that he was going to be, either, if not moving in with his daughter, moving somewhere in proximity to his daughter, as soon as she was able to kind of wrap her head around the fact that he wasn't going to be with Debbie anymore. But the fact of the matter is, the passage of time is coming for all of us, and we're all going to be fine. We're all going to be fine until we're not. And it got to a point where, the reason we took him in was to keep him from that fate, but you can only postpone that for so long. And, it just got to a point where that was really the only, that was the only viable option, because, none of us know, Danny is smart as a whip, but I don't think he knows how to start an IV, so it ended the way that it would have ended whether we took him in or not, because
no, but you gave him some more time, you gave him some more adventures, you gave him, the little element of family and fellowship, and even just a simple dynamic of being able, to get up and make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You and I both know once you go into that type of assisted living scenario, that shit's over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to serve you what they're going to serve you. You don't get to just kind of free roam like that anymore. And rightfully so, because again, as it continues to progress, it's not like, they choose to be that way. It's just, the brain is not functioning the way that it used to, and that is the horror with anybody that's had to go through this type of experience with somebody who goes through Alzheimer's and the progression of the dementia and stuff, that, there is no happy ending.
Well, I mean, like I said, we're all headed for the same place at some point, but I would rather hit the wall going 90 miles an hour than to go this way. It's
like sobering. I know, it's very sobering.
I can deal with physical shortcomings, and I can deal with, not being able to do things that I could do when I was 20 or 30 years old, and the physical aspects of aging. If I'm still myself and I'm still able to sit down with you and talk and tell stories and remember who I am and be able to tell you, things with a degree of clarity, okay, yeah, I'll take a knee replacement here or there if that's the price for having that. But when you start to lose that sense of self and that sense of identity, and you don't have, when that stuff isn't available for recall anymore, and your world shrinks down to the point that, you're literally just, watching Jerry Maguire over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, again, there is no simple answer, but like you said, it does become a framework of, to some degree, just going through the motions. Like, all right, so we're just going to keep dragging this out for what? So an insurance company can make money, or, any number of the analogies, because you and I both know that our systems are not really, conducive to, creating a viable environment unless you've got buco bucks to dump into it and, to go to these kind of pseudo resort type of places, which, obviously George didn't have that type of resources. He didn't become rich like some other, people in the industry did. So, it was kind of like, well, thank you for everything you did. And, now, figure out what you do on the back end, and that was one of the things I know you had mentioned when we had last talked about it. Most people were not willing, even a lot of the people who were, in his circles back in the day. Now, granted, to some degrees, it was, like you said, this goes back a couple of decades, so it was a progression. But it is, the reality that people, especially as we get older, they tend to get forgotten, and they tend to get kind of filed away. You know what I mean? We want them out of sight, out of mind. Now, again, there's some beautiful elements of it. I know I did appreciate, seeing that stuff, and, appreciate you sharing, the stories, because that's one of the things, I guess, again, as musicians, performers, songwriters and stuff, is keeping those elements alive. You know, the stories, the experiences reflect all those things. Every song has some of that degree to it, even if it's, you know, just a bebop, hey bebop type of thing. There's still something underneath it that's driving it.
Well, yeah, everybody listens to music for different reasons. Some people listen to music to dance. Some people listen to music to try to connect with, you know, something they've lost. Some people listen to music just to fill up the space in their house. You know, it depends on what their reasons are. You know, I was never really a dancer. I was, you know, always kind of, you know, trying to, you know, being the little alien kid that I was, always trying to look for something bigger than myself to connect with. And that's what drove me. And there is no invalid reason for listening to music, but yeah, there's something. There's got to be, for me, there's got to be an element of connectivity in there somewhere. It's got to show me something about myself, or show me something about the world that I had missed out on or forgotten, or, you know, something of that nature.
Which brings us to a good segue. One of the tracks that you just released is actually a cover of an old Fleetwood Mac tune, which I thought was really wild, that, you know, you went to something, at least within the elements of your genre catalog, was a little bit outside the box. You know what I mean? Not hugely, but Fleetwood Mac, I don't think, would ever have been kind of associated with Americana or, you know, the country folk rock dynamic that like a Poco or, you know, Marshall Tucker, even to some degrees. And we were talking a little bit off of there, but why don't you tell folks about what brought you to choose Angel as a song to include on this new album?
Well, I've got to admit to being a Fleetwood Mac fan, I've always found certain records anyway, from that particular era fascinating, in that, you know, if you put on Dreams and listen to Dreams is, for most of the record, literally just a bass and a drum kit with some volume swells over it and a few little pieces of Hammond organ thrown in here and there. There's almost nothing to it, but it's a great record. And a lot of their records from that period, the mid to the late 70s, you know, have this weird, it's almost like sparseness to the extreme. And that particular song, the one that I covered, is from the Tusk album, which always gets, you know, a lot of barbs and spears thrown at it for some of the content. But that song, I think, is the first song on one of the sides of the double record. And it's just bass, drums, and a little electric piano thing. And the bass line in that song, I love it so much because it's almost too busy, but it carries the song. Like, it's the thing that actually picks the song up and carries it down the road. And it's another one of those, you know, possible pitfalls of having a studio at your disposal all the time. At some point, I was setting up a high string guitar to do some overdubs with, and I just kind of strummed the chords of that song. And I was like, well, this sounds pretty cool. And I started singing it. It's in the key of G, which is the key that they recorded it in. So I was first kind of a little surprised that I was able to sing Stevie Nicks songs in her key, but so I recorded like just like two verses and a chorus, and then picked up the bass and started working out the bass line. And I was like, oh my God, I can actually play this.
You found your groove with it, man.
So I was like, you know what? So I went back and I, you know, pulled up the song and wrote down the lyrics and kind of worked out an arrangement. And instead of the piano, which is on the Fleetwood Mac tune, I used the high string guitar to kind of carry the chordal structure of it. And I just kind of, you know, I've been sitting on it for a while. I had it laying around for a long time, but at the end of the year, I wanted to put something out into the stream for, you know, folks that had been, you know, waiting for this solo record that I've been working on, that I kind of got derailed on, and waiting for this other thing and so I put The Road South and one other original song out there, and then I put that out on the music player on my Reverb Nation page, just as, you know, a gift. It's just there if you want to listen to it. I'm not making any money off of it, and neither is Stevie Nicks. It's just a free cover that you can go listen to. But I had a lot of fun with it. It was, sometimes sitting down and doing something like that is just good therapy.
It's cathartic, isn't it? And it allows us to tap into things that, let's be honest, when they make an impact on us, and we all have that. All music is born of other music. You know what I mean? It's the natural progression of it. So, blues and gospel kind of led into this, and then it became this, and it became that. So taking from those elements and giving it, a little bit of the twist, I think is the best testament to keeping those elements alive. And again, of all the songs that you could have chosen off of an album like Tusk, Angel definitely is, that's not a heavy, airplay one. You and I both know, of the songs from that album, most people, unless you're really a deep Fleetwood Mac fan, would not even recognize it. Obviously Stevie's voice is iconic, that would be, oh, okay, well, this is Stevie Nicks, but you get where I'm going, of the choices you could have pulled to, which really, I think, also speaks to the connection that you had with it. It obviously just wasn't, again, a low fruit grab type of thing. It was like, oh, let me just, put out, something that's going to garner attention. And I think it's a really great version. So let's play that for folks again. This is another one of the three that you released. And again, it is a cover of Fleetwood Mac's Angel, and then we'll be back.
Sometimes the most beautiful things, the most innocent things, and many of those dreams pass us by, they keep passing me by. It's funny that you understood. I knew you would, 'cause when you were good, you were very, very good. So I close my eyes softly till I become part of the wind that we all long for sometimes. Yeah. And to those that I love, like a ghost through a fog, like a charm now and a haunted song, and the angel, my dream. It's funny that you understood. I knew you would, 'cause when you were good, babe, you were very good. But I still look up when you walk in the room. I've the same wide eyes, they tell stories. I try not to reach out, but then you turn around and say hello, and we both pretend, no great pretender. So I close my eyes softly till I become that part of the wind that we all long for sometimes. Yeah. And to those that I love, like a ghost through a fog, like a charm now
All right, so yeah, that was Brother Tom Hampton's cover of Fleetwood Mac's Angel. Again, I like what you did with that, and then that subtlety, like you said, of using a different approach with the guitars versus the keyboard to kind of, again, to make it your own. Like, you know, it is obviously what it is, but it's unique in how you did it, I guess, is really the only way to describe it.
It's the end result of having too much time on my hands and having too many tools in the tool shed.
Right, too much time on our hands. Which, you know, we were talking again offline, and we wanted to segue in this. You know, you and I are both big fans of Almost Famous, and the whole analogy, the story of, you know, the early mid 70s dynamic of how rock and roll was shifting, and, you know, the narrative of being young in this time period. You were using the William Miller, you know, analogy. And, you know, I thought what you said was really great. And I'd like you to kind of go back into it, which is basically, you know, coming from this point of a young person of having no music in your life to all of a sudden, here's all of this stuff. And, you know, for anybody at home who has not seen Almost Famous, it is really a great movie that not only captures the element of the time period, but it really reflects it within the music. You know what I mean? We joked about, you know, the Kansas scene, and you have Neil Young's, you know, everybody knows this is nowhere, and, you know, all of a sudden it leads into the I'm a golden god and him tripping and jumping off the fucking roof on acid and stuff, which, you know, not everybody maybe is going to relate to, but it was a crazy time period. And for us, as, you know, being young people, that's where a lot of our music was born out of, was, you know, the way rock and roll kind of hit its high water mark, you know, again, in the early mid 70s there. Well,
yeah, the thing that resonates with me about that, and I don't think that anybody but Cameron Crowe could have made that movie and had it resonate the way that it did, because the thing that I love about that guy is that, first and foremost, he's a fan of music. He's, you know, I mean, he's obviously done a lot of other things, but in that movie, it really kind of drives home for me that, yeah, it was never about, you know, getting a byline in Rolling Stone so that you could, you know, get with one of the cheerleaders, or it was never about trying to, you know, climb any kind of
it reflected innocence lost, because for all intents and purposes, and again, if you look at it from the character element of it, which is really kind of, you know, based off of him, it was a purity, you know what I mean? It wasn't about all the other stuff. He had no context. He had no concept of any of these things, and he just literally got thrust into it. And I remember, you know, when we had talked about it, and you made the great analogy, how you see the shift in who he is as a character. He literally, you know, ages, you know, 3 to 5, maybe more years in the space of a couple of months within the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of eureka moments when you get to look behind the curtain, but there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of, my vocabulary is kind of failing me at the moment. There's a lot of things that, you know, that people go out into the world and say that you shouldn't meet your heroes for a reason. You know, a lot of the things, you know, the mental images and the fantasies that we, you know, construe when we're, you know, sitting at home listening to records, or, you know, listening to the clock radio that our mom got us for Christmas. You know, when you're, you know, reading Cream and Hit Parader and Rolling Stone, and just kind of, you know, buying into this, you know, image that you're creating for yourself.
Right. The pre-MTV days, before we had, you know, shit like American Idol or any of that type of stuff.
Well, then, yeah, there was no cable TV. There was no internet. There was none of this. You know, we didn't have the access then that we have now. So that mystique that, you know, that the guy talks about in the movie was still very much something that you could, you know, cultivate and manage. But when you see behind it, and you see, you know, the actual struggle that takes place, and, you know, what you have to do in order to stay on top, and what you have to do in order to try to claw and fight and, you know, get some degree of traction never mind momentum. It wasn't easy then any more than it is now, and then, because of the gatekeepers that were in place, it was a lot harder in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's that famous scene where, Lester's in the studio and he's mocking Jim Morrison and he's like, Iggy Pop, give me Iggy. And she's like, isn't it too early? Because that, even like a guy like Iggy Pop had a hard time getting on commercial radio back in the day. Right.
There was the thing in radio back then that, there was certain music that was playable during daylight hours and there was other music that you only played after dark.
Right.
Which is, absurd, but that's the way that they thought. But yeah, going from living in a house where like the music was just kind of an afterthought and it was just something that, if you went to the Harvest Festival, there might be a band or something like that, to finding a suitcase full of records under your bed and just becoming enamored with it, and then getting your foot in that door at that age. Like you said, you can kind of see the innocence, washing off in the rain as the movie progresses. But the kid still, he still sat down at the end of the movie with this guy that completely screwed him over and had this, heart-to-heart conversation about not only the girl, but,
well, I mean,
what do you really love about music?
He shattered, I think, and there's one of the things I love about what he did with it. He shattered the illusion of the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. Like it was this really cool thing. Every teenage boy should, try and head to this thing. And it really was. It was a fucking illusion. And it was incredibly destructive. And he went into those things to say, you know what? This is this is really the fucking ugly side. This is what's killing it. When they have the interaction talking about, the real fans versus, the ones that are just, hanger-oners and stuff like that. The love of the music. And then obviously, Penny Lane getting traded to fucking, Deep Purple for a couple cases of fucking Heineken. You know what I mean? So it's
$50 in a case of Heineken. Right, and it was humble pie.
It was humble pie. That's right. Or they got it from Deep Purple. That's right.
Yeah, dude, it's embarrassing how much I know about that movie. Embarrassing.
But it really is. It's a great snapshot again of not only the time, but the scene. You know what I mean? They have their breakdown up in the sky, and we're all gonna fucking die, it's like, hey, I'm gay, you know what I mean? And that was something that you couldn't do back in that day, you know what I mean, especially within a rock and roll band, you know what I'm saying? So he was hitting on a lot of the nuances of the things that were kind of out of whack. Russell talks about how he could be so more, but everybody, they have jobs and they have houses and families and the whole, like, this t-shirt says everything that you really want to say because, the other guy's not quite in focus, right? And, all the bullshit that goes into the commercialization of music. It did in many ways kill some, if not a lot of, the dynamic of rock and roll.
Yeah, but I don't think Russell ever completely disconnected from that. And you see it in different spots in the movie. You see it in that scene. And again, I think we might be talking about two different movies here, because if you go out and you rent it off of Netflix or whatever,
you told me about the unedited version. Yeah, we had that conversation.
Yeah, you've got to see the unedited version, the untitled version they call it, because that's where everything starts to make sense. But the whole conversation that he has with William right after he comes on board, where he sits him down and tells him that, all these guys in the band, I'm past them as musicians, but, the bigger their houses get, the harder it gets to walk away from them, and then you forget what it means to be a fan. You see it in bands all the time. It's not about music anymore. It's about lifestyle maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about how, I used to be able to hear, the sounds of the world, man. To me, it all sounded like music. But
that's the line that's missing anymore from the actual theatrical release.
Yeah. I don't know who decided. I don't know who made those decisions, but
some corporate guy who was selling the advertising space for it, fucking probably. But that's always the narrative. It's somebody else taking it and trying to infuse some other dynamic into it that has no fucking place in it. At least for me. Granted, I'm lucky in this point now in my life that again, as we were talking earlier, I'm not beholden to any of the bullshit. I don't have to dance through it. So I can just say and do what the fuck I want. Go ahead, try and cancel me. I don't give a shit, so, but most people don't get that luxury. You say the wrong thing, and especially in the wrong context dynamic, that's your ass. You've lost your fucking job. You're canceled.
Yeah, I just never understood how gaining 20 seconds back from the running time of that movie and pulling that bit out, because it totally destroys the impact of the scene at the end of the movie after Penny overdosed and after he's sitting there with Sapphire at craft services backstage, and she's telling him all the same stuff that he told William at the beginning of the tour. And you see it creep over his face. She's like, these new girls, they don't use birth control and they eat all the steak. They don't have any idea what it means to love some band or some silly little piece of music so much that it hurts. They don't know what it means to be a fan. And that's when he picks up the phone and makes the phone call. But that thread that tied him to what made him want to be in a band in the first place, I think, I don't think Jeff Beebe has that thread. I don't think that Larry Fellows.
No, he's only the thread. Fucking singer.
Yeah, I don't think everybody else in the band is worried about getting off this tour where we're Black Sabbath special guest or whatever. He's still trying to write music. He's still trying to do something that has some kind of a creative edge, whereas everybody else is just, they're there for the party, and he's certainly there for the party too, but I don't know, man. Just I was playing in bands when I was William Miller's age. I was playing drums in bands in my hometown.
Get out of my head, because I was just going to ask you, what was your William Miller moment? What was that crossroads that you hit where you knew you were like, you know what? I'm going to play, I'm going to make music. This is what I'm going to do.
Well, it's kind of a layered thing. Because as I was alluding to earlier, I grew up with nothing, yard sale clothes, outdoor plumbing, drawing water from a well, the whole, redneck gothic fairy tale. That was kind of my life. And
see, that's a great concept for a new song.
But the notion of doing something like what I did, I may as well have decided I wanted to be the King of England. The resources just simply were not there for me to play an instrument, for me to do any of that stuff. But I built a drum kit because I decided I wanted to play the drums. I saw a band playing at church and they had a drummer and he looked like he was having so much fun. That's what I wanted to do. So I got buckets and I got, fence rails, and I nailed buckets to the side of these rails and drove them into the ground and made this ridiculous Fred Flintstone drum kit. And my mother at some point, and I'll never be able to thank her enough for this, at some point noticed that I was getting into, the notion of playing music, and she got me a clock radio for Christmas. And for me, that was the moment that, in The Wizard of Oz, where everything goes from black and white to color, because I grew up just across the state line from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where they had a radio station that played all that music that they were recording there. I couldn't have hit it at a better time. And that's all I did. When I wasn't at school, I had the radio on, and if I was able to grab an extension cord, I would bring the radio out next to this Fred Flintstone drum kit and pound on these buckets along. It's funny now, but at the time it was just like, what's wrong with Tommy? He ain't right.
But listen, in retrospect now, and I think that was a really great analogy, for all intents and purposes, it was no different than, becoming an astronaut and going to the moon, or as you said, becoming the King of England. But obviously something there spoke to you to such a degree, you found a way. And I think that's reflective of the better musicians. Again, I try to find that middle ground, but we have to call it out sometimes. Not everybody is cut from the same cloth. It's not their fault. It's not a blame thing. But you and I know that there are certain elements within it that you either have or you don't. They're not aspects that you can really learn. They can't be taught. They're inherent. You know, it was like the old the running joke, you know, when Bo Diddley was interviewed in the early 70s, and he just made a statement, and to paraphrase it, basically said, you know, you either got rhythm or you don't. You know, it's just like there was no ambiguity, there was no, you know, it's just like, no, you either have it or you don't. And
well, that's absolutely true.
It's hard to put a needle on it, but you get where I'm going.
But by the same token, how many other people have it and had no avenue by which to exploit it, you know? And I was this close.
True. No, that's a great point. Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there are a lot of people who, you know, who have perfect pitch, who could have probably played an instrument, you know, by sitting down and hearing a note and being able to but just didn't have anybody in their corner to look out for them. I mean, I was lucky enough that, you know, the guy who was my math teacher in 7th grade also owned the music store in my hometown. And he knew that I wanted to play. He knew that he made sure that I had drums. I started, there was a family that lived down the street from me that played instruments. And one of their sons, who was a friend of mine in school, had this drum set that he never played anymore because he had made the transition to guitar. And my mother somehow found $40 to buy this drum kit. And so I took that drum kit and kind of, you know, refurbished it and made it work. And then I traded that drum kit to my math teacher, who got me like an actual, you know, something that I could take out and play in front of people and not look like a cast member from the Flintstones. So, you know, and then from there, you know, I played with their family's band for a while. And then there was one actual legitimate rock band in Savannah, Tennessee at the time. And at some point they opened a studio. It was like a little 4-track, you know, it was certainly nothing special, but they opened a studio, and I had the gall, because I didn't know any better than not to call these guys up and ask them if they ever hired studio musicians. And they actually gave me, at the time, and I was about 15, 16 years old. I was William Miller's age. I went in and they let me sit in and play along with them for like half an hour. And they took my name and number. And then their drummer quit a year later, and they called me for the gig. So the guitar player in that band is actually the guy I refer to in the first verse of the Mount Rushmore song, because he singled me out and showed me the ropes, because I knew nothing about anything. And he was largely responsible for, like, you know, this is where fills go. And this is, you know, you need to play straight time here, and, you know, lay back in the verses and, you know, hit a little harder in the chorus. And, you know, he taught me what arrangements were. You know, I used to, you know, like I would ride back from gigs with him, and he'd always have Little Feat playing in the car. It was one of those things where I could not have asked for a better foil for my musical education than Opie.
And here's the irony, because for most of the circles that you're known in, and I don't mean this in any offensive type of way, you're known as a guitar player. You're really as a pedal, you know, slide type of guy, and very highly regarded. So, I mean, you went from one end of the spectrum to becoming now, you know, somebody who's played with, you know, Marshall Tucker and Poco as a guitar player. When did the guitar actually enter the scene? When did that become part of the story for you?
Well, you've obviously caught on to the fact that I didn't stay in my hometown for long. That was certainly an objective.
That much is in your bio, bro.
That was you know, because I knew that, you know, there was nothing waiting for me if I stayed there, and I had to get out of there. And I didn't really have a plan, but at some point, you know, back in the day, in those days anyway, in my high school, taking the ASVAB test wasn't it wasn't mandatory, but they made sure that everybody took it. You know, there was an assembly, and everybody went into the auditorium, and everybody took the ASVAB test. So I just thought the thing was a joke, and I just sat there with my little cardboard, you know, paper with all of the circles on it, and just kind of drew figures onto the thing, because I wasn't going into the military. I wasn't doing anything that stupid. I was going to be a rock and roll star. So I completely fudged the ASVAB test and apparently scored out the roof on the thing just by guessing answers. I didn't even read the text of the questions. I just sat there and colored in, all these answers on this test, and got a call from the recruiter like 3 weeks later. He's like, you can have any job you want.
So the universe basically was like, you think you're getting away with this one.
So I started thinking about it because, he talked a pretty good game, and he offered me some stuff that they never did. Like, but that's what recruiters do. But ultimately, I just thought to myself, I can either save money for college and never actually have enough to go for more than a year, or these guys can pay me to get out of here. And I'll actually get to land somewhere other than my hometown, whether I like it or not. So it didn't take me long to figure out that there were some definite advantages to going into the military out of high school. And if I wanted to go to college later, I could do that later. But I went into the military out of high school and went to Florida, and then went to Iceland and went to Wales. And but the answer to your question that you asked, what feels like an hour ago, is that when it came time to leave, the drums weren't as portable as the guitar was. So the guitar came along, the drums didn't. And that's where the shift took place.
And then everything. I mean, listen, I am incredibly grateful for it because, again, I've played with a few people over the day, and I've listened to a lot of stuff. You have a natural feel for the stuff that you do. And, again, I'll just use my own personal experience analogy. You can take just about anything and interpret it. It was the same analogy. Chris Hicks had said this again about you, during those days back, that you just naturally fit. You had that magic, I guess is really no other way to put it. And it's allowed you to take it, from, a backwater town in Tennessee to, again, not to be redundant, you played with Marshall Tucker, you played with Poco, you played a few places along the way.
Well, one of the great things about teaching yourself is that, and there really was nobody else to actually teach me the fundamentals of any of this stuff. I learned it by watching TV and listening to music and looking at pictures and watching other people play when I could and trying to figure out, what they did and how they did it. And then, later on, especially with the guitar, there was stuff that was available to me that I could, use as a teaching tool. But so much of it just involves listening. You have to listen. If you want to learn anything, you have to listen to the thing that you're trying to learn. If you can develop that talent, that'll take you a lot farther than most of the academic stuff, because if you can listen and think critically and pay attention to what's going on around you and react to that instead of just trying to play every lick that you ever learned and trying to impress somebody or something like that. I've told people hundreds of times that I'm all but certain, and I will die certain, that most of the work I've ever gotten, or most of any of the attention I've ever gotten, has been a result of what I didn't play as opposed to what I did play. Because that's where you find the magic, is in those little holes that exist.
It's an interesting perspective on it. I like it. Why don't you segue for us, and you mentioned it a little bit on the third track of the new releases, Mount Rushmore.
Well, that title, I used to use that word a lot, talking about the person that the last verse of the song is about. I used to say that, David Lindley was on my Mount Rushmore, up there with, Rusty and Paul and Dwayne Allman and Ry Cooder and Joe Walsh and all these guys that kind of, if you could look at somebody's life like rings of a tree, there's definitely a lot of rings in the center of my particular tree that David Lindley and Rusty Young are responsible for.
Definitely. That's well said. Yeah.
We lost David last year, and I, at some point, was thinking about the fact that, December is also the anniversary of the passing of Dan Fogelberg, who was somebody that I looked up to from as far back as I can remember. I just thought that the guy he could do everything. He could play classical music. He could play bluegrass. He could play guitar. He could play piano. He was a great songwriter. He sang like nobody I ever heard before. And, you know, as an impressionable kid, there was a lot to learn there for me. And Dan passed away in December, and Opie, the guy from my first real rock and roll band, passed away on Christmas Day in 2014. So this year, it's 10 years that he'll be gone. And the song just kind of wrote itself as all this stuff kind of occurred to me at the same time. So the first verse is definitely about Opie and the fact that, you know, I walked into that room that night to play for those guys and didn't know anything about anybody. And he just made this huge impression and just, you know, kind of grabbed me out of nowhere and pointed me in the right direction. And then the second verse is kind of it's an amalgam of Fogelberg and Jackson Brown and, you know, a lot of the singer-songwriter Americana stuff that came out of that California country rock scene, you know, the guys hanging out at the Troubadour Bar. And then the last verse is decidedly and absolutely the property of David Lindley, because, you know, I don't remember when I became aware of what he was doing specifically on lap steel guitar. But at some point after seeing Jackson play and hearing that instrument, there was just something about it. It was like the clouds opened and this little ray of sunlight shone down on this thing.
You had your epiphany.
And I was like, I have got to learn how to do that thing, whatever that is, whatever that noise is that instrument is making. I have got to figure that out. And, you know, and here again, just to have lived at the time that I've lived and to have been lucky enough to go from, you know, watching him play with Jackson Brown on Saturday Night Live in my little house with no indoor plumbing to getting to know him and, you know, having voicemails on my phone from him and, you know, getting to ask him specific questions and getting to go from, you know, somebody that was a hero figure to somebody that you're on a first name basis with. You know, those kind of gifts in life are you know, it's pretty profound when you stop to think about it. And, you know, so those three, you know, that song probably wrote itself in about half an hour.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, you know, as a guitar player, I always recommend, you know, those elements. Like when I was a kid, my mother had a dobro, you know what I mean? And I remember experimenting, you know, and I'm functional in it, but I don't have the nuance that you have because I kind of chose just a little bit different direction. And that is just, you know, unique to every musician as to what speaks to them. But there are really beautiful and incredibly powerful, you know, subtleties within those sounds and how they can fill, you know, some of those empty spaces and stuff. So, you know, that was why, you know, again, you know, it has stood out, you know, not just with me, but obviously with a lot of people over the years. And I see it reflected, you know, and it's mentioned, you know, many times over that, you know, you have become really, you know, one of the guys, you know, that we kind of look to now for that. You know, granted, you know, obviously I'm sure you'd like to have a bigger paycheck and a little bit more of the notoriety type of thing. But on the other side of the coin, I think where it actually counts within the music circles, you know, it gets associated with you.
Well, you know, I mean, that's a byproduct of doing it for the right reasons, I think. I mean, I have, you know, if I sat down with a balance sheet and put all the money that I've made on one side and all the money that I've spent to be able to do this on the other, one of those is going to be hugely more than the other, and it's going to be the one that you probably would expect. But
oh yeah, because listen, we both know that stuff is not fucking cheap.
Yeah,
not cheap.
You know, but yeah, I've always found whatever you know, I've always had a day job of some sort, you know, except for a couple of little pockets here and there. But yeah, if you're doing this just to make money, you know, there's lots of other easier, you know, far less spiritually taxing ways to make money than to try to chase this particular thing. Because if you're chasing the making money part of it, you're missing out on all of the cool shit.
I think it's like you said in the beginning, it's not authentic. It's not real because I go back again to, some of the older dynamics of what I was exposed to as a kid. You listen to, early Motown and early blues and again, Americana, folk music, bluegrass. There's incredible power. There's almost a spiritual element to it, for again, a lack of a better way to put it. And you and I both know there was no fucking money in it back then. These were, things that were done within the scopes of families and communities. And it was almost an underground element that, like a lot of things when it kind of, became a little bit more popular and then you had the birth of rock and roll, it became, a profit driving thing. So it's a great analogy, you know what I mean? Again, the other side of the coin, I would like to be able to, and one of the things that I really appreciate about it is, my interactions with you changed my path. You know what I'm saying? So, sometimes, it's that, those moments in life that, you either take something from it or you don't. But for some of us, it's the only way it works. Music it really is. It's part of our fucking life.
Well, again, the thing that drives you to do it, there's a house in East Nashville on Boscobel, over on East Nashville, just right on this other side of the river. And there was a move at one point when I first moved to town to try to put it on the National Register of Historic Places, but it was a boarding house that a lot of the guys who played the Opry lived there, and they'd all have one room and they'd share a bathroom on each floor. None of these guys were doing this to be famous. They were doing it because they were pickers, and that's what they did. And they certainly weren't reaping any financial rewards by living in a boarding house and sharing a bathroom with Bubba the bass player across the hall. So it's all of the people that came into this from the time that you're talking about were doing it because of just the literal joy of doing it, the literal joy of sitting down with 2 or 3 other people and picking up an instrument and being able to do something that you can't do by yourself.
Well said, brother. Well said. All right, listen, we're going to cut. I'm going to play that third track of your new releases, Mount Rushmore, and then we will be back.
First time I'd ever seen a real Gibson Les Paul. There was crushed blue velour covering every wall. Every soul in that room was a stranger to me. Yeah, but you played your ass off as cool as could be. So we learned all the songs and we loaded the van. And I tripped backwards into a rock and roll band. And you took me under your cynical wing and laid out the blueprint for everything. Like rings buried deep in the heart of the tree, preserving each lesson you passed on to me. I can still see your faces no matter light, carved into the side of Mount Rushmore tonight. like an angel with a beat-up guitar, like Shakespeare and Jesus at the Troubadour bar, with misplaced desperados all lined up outside. Yeah, but you left a footprint 100 miles wide. Oh, when I memorized every song that I heard, studied the liner notes and sang every word. With those Henry Diltz photographs burned in my mind, I walked away from my old dreams and left them behind. Like rings buried deep in the heart of the tree, preserving each lesson you passed on to me. I can still see your faces, no matter the lights, carved into the side of Mount Rushmore tonight. Can't say I remember when I first heard that sound, felt that wail and that rumble from deep in the ground. Behind a row of guitar necks at the edge of the band, that current that flowed from your heart to your hand, with the bar on the strings and your hair in your eyes. I'd watch you ricochet between bliss and surprise, those crazy loud clothes and that devilish grin. I can't help but believing I'll see you again. Like rings buried deep in the heart of the tree, preserving each lesson you passed on to me. I can still see your faces, no matter the light, carved into the side of Mount Rushmore tonight. Yeah, I can still see your faces, no matter the light, carved into the side of Mount Rushmore.
So yeah, that was the third of the new releases, Mount Rushmore, and really cool stuff. Again, knowing you for a while now, you definitely have the touch. Not obviously as just as a musician, but from the engineering. You know what I mean? That you have embraced these little subtleties of things, and you've made it yours. You know what I mean? And you're not afraid again to go outside of the box and say, hey, I'm going to do this because it speaks to me.
Well, the technical aspect of it, the engineering and all of that, and choosing which mic to put on a speaker cabinet and what microphone to put on a bass drum versus what microphone to put on a snare drum. If I live to be 90 years old, I will still be a rookie where all that's concerned. I just kind of approach that as, how can I get this thing to translate? That song, for instance, there was an octave mandolin called a bouzouki on that track, and there was a Weissenborn Hawaiian guitar on that track, which is one of the things that David Lindley was famous for. That track was kind of trying to assemble, there's an acoustic guitar that's capoed all the way up at the 9th fret. It was just trying to find a mixture of sounds that were complementary, because I started working on that as something to be part of what I hope to be kind of a David Lindley tribute record at some point. And I've got a few things cut for that are kind of works in progress. And the version of that I was leaning toward putting out, it actually has a full drum kit on it and has a baritone guitar on it, for the bottom end. And that version just kind of grew out of the other version. And again, I was coming up toward the end of the year, and I kind of wanted to put something out just to remind people that I had not died since the Cimarron 615 thing kind of fell apart for me, and that there actually is still stuff. I'm not just going on the internet and saying that I'm working on new music. There actually is stuff that's in the pipeline. And, it was just kind of a wellness check for me to let people know that, yeah, I actually am, in the process of working on not just one, but a couple of projects.
Well, I mean, listen, in fairness, like we talked about earlier too, you've also had a lot on your plate. You're a father. You were a caretaker for the past year.
It has been a crazy year.
You're an advocate on a few different things. I mean, again, I've been following you for a few. I've known you for a few and stuff like that. The first time I met you, and Chris Miller was mentioning it, in the chat, when we first met at Teresa's place, you didn't know me. You didn't know me from fucking Adam, and you went out of your way to be like, hey, let me give you my perspective on it. We both had young kids at the time. You know what I mean? We both had a couple of dynamics that were similar and stuff. And you were very gracious and magnanimous about not only sharing those dynamics, but being like, hey, how the music, touches in. Hey, let's jam together. Let's just have some fun. You weren't like a lot of people, unfortunately, in our scene become, completely ego consumed. Don't talk to me, or, pay me $30 and I'll give you an autograph type of moment. And again, I don't begrudge the elements. People got to sell merch and make a living and stuff. But you were not only authentic, but you had honest empathy, and that weekend really was an incredibly powerful weekend, and it touched a lot of people. And those elements, my son, I'm going to throw this picture up on here to kind of jam back to the day. One of those shows, and I don't know if you remember, was the one when Artemis's his fucking drum trailer got all ganked out, and it's me and my son Pat and one of the other guys with Artemis trying to fix the fucking trailer. So that way, not only could he get his shit out, but that way he could actually get his stuff back home. And it was that one of the Rocks Ribs and Ridges show in North Jersey again, that correlated with Teresa's house where we were all at.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit, surrounding the circumstances of that last song. If it hadn't have been for those three people in my life, I would be handing out packs of cigarettes behind the counter at a MAPCO. There's no way I would have ever have been able to do what I did with my life without the support of those people early on. And to me, it just kind of feels, it's created an imperative for me over the course of my life that if I'm in a position to listen to somebody or to offer somebody some sort of support or encouragement or, an actual critical ear, or, maybe you should try doing this way. I'm watching you with your left hand. Maybe you should try, if you move your wrists down, it won't hurt as much to play. Just little stuff like that. If I've got that to offer, I'm not doing Opie a service by not offering that up, because he offered that to me, and I have to, and it's not a thing where it's like, oh, well, gee, I have to sit here and I don't, feel
No,
like
listen,
that.
I've known you. I know you well enough, I think, to say that you believe in it. It's part of your character. It's part of your philosophy of life, and it's like anything else. You have to feed it to keep it alive. You know what I mean? You can't just ignore it and leave it in a corner or chained outside on a fucking tree, and expect that it going to be able to maintain whatever it is, or the analogy of a garden. If you don't take care of it, if you don't weed it, if you don't water it and plant it, you don't get anything out of it. So it, for you, with what you do, not only as a creator, as a writer, as a musician, it's also, I think, to some degrees reflective of your journey as a father and as a brother, like we talked about with what you did for George.
Well, I'm able to sleep at night, I guess, that certainly helps. But, and part of that is because of the fact that, if I get opportunities to contribute in some way like that, I try to take advantage of them.
Yeah, no, listen, it made an impact, and, it carried forward. Again, I was really, really blown away, by the experience, and it set the stage, for a lot of other stuff. And that carried over, with my son, you know what I mean? So it is those proverbial, ripples that, carry forward and shift the element. But you got a lot of really great experiences and stories. Is there anything particular you want to throw out, since we can get away with it here? Any particular kind of, this is a story that nobody's heard before, and, just really kind of push the envelope out there. That way we can wake up tomorrow and they'll be like, yes, they let the cat out of the bag. We must cancel them. And then we can just laugh and be like, yeah, go ahead, try and fucking cancel us.
I can't really think of anything terrible. I mean, if you're looking for
I'm being sarcastic. No, honestly, like something that stands out in a dynamic that, again, sometimes, like we talked about with, like the FM radio shows, you can't always have those types of conversations. Again, don't get me wrong, I don't want you to out anybody and be like, hey, Bob Z was fucking a goat back there in 79, and you know what I mean, really, throw somebody under the fucking bus. But I
don't have anything terribly, I mean, other than, like skinny dipping in the hotel pool with, I mean, there's always stuff like that. But
no, I meant the more real, dynamic, tangible things where you have those, kind of campfire mystical moments, or those iconic, jam session types of things, or even just, we were talking about it last time, when you talk in the narrative of the Marshall Tucker Band and some of the elements, like Chris and Dibby and Doug and stuff like that, every time they come around, it's a fucking adventure that creates its own fucking stories. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, it's all kind of baked into the cake, really. When, if you're on that path, if you're on the bus, then, those kind of things are going to, I think we talked the last time we talked on the radio about the Kid Rock gig in Connecticut.
No, we were talking about Doug Gray, and we drew the analogy that his mind is like a barrel of some really heavy aged bourbon that he just he'll pour you a shot of it, and he just has these incredible stories and interactions. And then I think one of the other things was also correlated with them, and one of the episodes with Dibby, I think, were the two things that we talked about.
Chris may be able to corroborate this and actually add some names to this. I've forgotten the guy's name because his Facebook page for years was just called Bat Rod's Replicas. And he's a guy that lives somewhere in New York that builds actual replicas of the original Adam West era Batmobile. And he would build them on, I think, like Camaro frames. But he also makes apple pie moonshine. He makes homemade apple pie moonshine. And we were playing a show in Hartford, Connecticut, and it was Marshall Tucker, and Kid Rock was the headliner, and Marshall Tucker and Uncle Kracker were on the bill as well. So he brought 3 of these like Sam's Club sized Ocean Spray cranberry juice cocktail bottles full of apple pie moonshine to the gig. And one of them he put on the bus, and he kept one for himself. It was like his own personal bottle. And then there was another one that we were all kind of passing around. And it was going down really, really easy. And we finished the show, and we took the bus back, and we were all kind of sitting around outside the hotel room because well, there were some other circumstances maybe I shouldn't bring up about somebody else who was on the hunt for Chris at the time. But
oh, listen, I talked to Chris not even a week ago. He's going to come on the show in the next month or so. So we'll do something. I'll get him to collaborate and be like, listen, Tom didn't want to throw you under the bus, because Chris is the kind of guy, he likes to throw himself under the bus. I think he'll enjoy that more.
I mean, I'm trying not to embarrass anybody. There was a particular fan who was enamored with Chris, and he was just kind of trying to gracefully sidestep that as gracefully as he could. But we were all just kind of hanging around on the tailgate of somebody's truck, drinking this apple pie moonshine, and it just kind of vanished really, really quickly. And bus call was early the next morning because we were on our way up the interstate to go somewhere else. And I just kind of crawled onto the bus and poured myself into a seat. And Dibby came over with the bus bottle of Ocean Spray Cranberry Apple Pie Moonshine and put it on the table in front of me. And I just kind of gently pushed it over to one side. And Dibby, if you know Dibby, you'll hear this in his voice, kind of looked over with a little glint in his eye. He's like, "Oh, I see it ain't as popular as it was last night."
I know Miller's over there back at his place. He's rolling because he had a lot of the Dibby stories, and a lot of those adventures, again, were born out of, again, like you, really humble. Again, I remember the first time meeting, Doug and Chris and the rest of them. They took my son on the bus and stuff, and we were just, we were working security for them, just like 1,000 other shows that they had done, but they made it a point to make people part of the family. And then over time, as we did more and interacted and stuff like that, it really, it left a mark, even to this day, even years later. Now, like you said, it's like, oh, damn, it's fucking 10 years later, dude. Yeah.
I actually, for Chris's birthday, I went to this RV place and found a frying pan that actually plugs into like a 12 volt AC adapter, like they have on the bus, like one of the outlets on the bus. So that I got him that because one night Chris and I and the driver, his last name was Petty. I want to say his name was Ricky Petty, but it might be Jimmy Petty. It was something that sounded like he should have been a stock car driver, but nicest guy on the planet, but he wasn't going to let you find that out. I'd get off the bus and I'd be like, "I'll see you later, Jimmy." He's like, "Not if I see you first." So one night we were up and we were talking and the TV was on, and I was like, "Hey, Jimmy, can we get you anything?" He's like, "Yeah, get me a fried bologna sandwich."
Yeah, Miller says it's Jimmy, and I remember you continue with it, but I remember you shared this one with me, so I'm not going to spoil it. Keep going.
So he's like, "Yeah, give me a fried bologna sandwich." And I was like, "Well, dude, there's nothing to." He's like, "Can I get you?" He's like, "You didn't ask me what we had. You asked me what I wanted, and I want a fried bologna sandwich." So Hicks and I took the toaster out from under the seat and laid it on its side and jammed the handles down and shoved like 2 or 3 slices of bologna into the toaster to try to fry bologna so that we can make Jimmy a fried bologna sandwich on the bus going down the highway. But so I actually got him like a little George Foreman like plug-in thing, so that the next time he had to fry bologna, he'd have something on the bus to fry bologna with.
Dude, listen, these are the iconic moments in life that just really, they're so beautiful. I really, again, I want to thank you for sharing them. So what's next for you? Do you have obviously a couple more tracks before you finish up this album and it comes out as a complete album?
Well, I've got probably close to 28 songs in various stages of completion.
So many albums.
Well, there's going to be a record that'll be coming out late spring, early summer. It'll be my first actual release of all original material since Carmichael Angels came out.
Sunset Rodeo going to be on that?
Sunset Rodeo will be on that.
Cool.
The last thing I did before I came up, because that one's in the middle of I had put drums on it, and I actually took the bass off that I'd originally put on it before the drums went on, and put a new bass track on that lined up better with the drums. So, you know,
So I actually have a bootleg version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit's going in the archive for sure, man.
But that record is going to be coming out. I still want to sit down with somebody who has better ears than I do and get some of this unreleased stuff from Our Mutual Angels era stuff kind of mastered and dialed in, so that I can do because that record's 25 years old. I wanted to do kind of a deluxe, you know, re-release with demos and alternate mixes and stuff like that. That's going to happen. And then I've got 4 songs total slated for this David Lindley tribute record that I want to do. So there's you know, I kind of feel like I'm going through this David Crosby thing where, you know, there was nothing for years, and then, like, you know, every 20 minutes he was putting out another record.
That's a great analogy. You know, and another, you know, another loss. You know what I mean? You know, despite some of his wayward ways, he definitely, you know, he had a way. You know what I mean? And he had a really, I think, incredible perspective on it. You know, a lot of people found it rough. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and he was incredible. Yeah, he was outspoken about it, but, you know, you cannot, I think, at least, you know, again, as a guitar player, you know, you look at the stuff that he did, and it set the stage for so much of it, you know. And again,
he was one of those guys that just kind of had a disdain for 3-chord rock and roll. He was always looking for something that had a little more harmonic complexity. He was always trying to figure out chord changes that were kind of, you know, left to right of center. That was his thing. That's what drove him. But then every now and again, he would trip over something that was just innately beautiful. You know, that song "In My Dreams" from that CSN record they did, you know, in '77 is one of my favorite songs ever. And it's just got this great little, you know, descending chord change in it that, you know, he wouldn't have found it if he was in standard tuning. It was one of those things that just wasn't going to reveal itself to him.
Yes, no, that great point and stuff like that. I remember, you know, some of my first experimentations, you know, was going into those different types of tunings and, you know, playing around and experimenting with it. I remember spending, you know, for me, Deja Vu was, you know, one of the more, you know, go-to, I guess it spoke to me more, you know, in just the simplest analogy. But it is also reflective, you know, again, he had a very wide journey, and I think he's one of those guys, unfortunately, that, you know, he's kind of underrated in the scheme of things, if you dig where I'm going. Like, you know, again, you know, you talk Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, you know, you always hear a lot of the Stephen Stills, you hear the Neil Young, you know, obviously Graham Nash, you can make a case that, you know, he's kind of, you know, pushed a little bit, but Crosby always had this other, I guess you could say, odd man out, you know, dynamic within it. And I think that was even the case within the Byrds too. Yeah.
And, you know, Cameron Crowe made a documentary about Crosby before he passed called Remember My Name.
Yeah, it's fucking great, dude.
And he kind of addressed the fact that, you know, he found himself at a point in his life where, you know, he was estranged from everybody. He had, you know, all of the heavy hitters that he had made music with, he had managed to estrange himself from everybody. And, you know, it takes a lot of insight, I think, to be able to sit and look at yourself in the mirror and say that to yourself, especially at the end of your life, you know. And I think he was very much anticipating the end of his life when he made that movie. I don't think he would have ever done it under normal circumstances.
But you can also, too, and I think you would agree with me, he was at peace with it. You know what I mean? You know, I think in many ways, you know, you could say, all right, maybe, you know, it's cathartic or whatever, but I didn't get the impression, or, you know, maybe it's just the subtlety of what I wanted to see, but it really felt like, you know, he was at peace with the whole thing. You know, he was going to be honest about it. And, you know, whereas, yeah, he had regrets and things and like that, but it was still a hell of a ride. You know what I'm saying? He was always, you know, finding that other underlying element to drive it, you know, and he made music for a long time.
Right up to the end. He had set up a couple of shows at the Libero Theater. He wasn't able to play anymore. he had gotten to a point where he wasn't able to play guitar anymore. And Steve Postel was going to cover his acoustic parts, and they were going to start doing shows again. And then he passed away. Kind of the same thing that happened with Rusty. You know, we were getting ready to go back out, and then we all woke up one morning and he was gone. So, but the central tenet to me of that whole Crosby thing is, you know, the message that he kept driving home is like, you know, I have to make music. It's the only thing I've got to contribute. It's the only thing that I can put out into the world that, you know, that feels like it's, you know, that feels like I have a purpose here, you know, and I relate to that 100%. Because,
yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Very well said.
Know, none of us are getting any younger. And, you know, like I told you at the top of the conversation,
right, yeah.
You know, there's a lot of songs on this record that, you know, kind of look right at that. You know, there's a song called Middle of the Road that's about kind of about my whole determination for most of my life to try to work as a musician and to try to make an attempt to be a father to my kids and a husband to my partner. And when you're trying to do one or the other, it's like you're always trying to walk this line and you're never really fully committing to either side of the road. You're just kind of dancing down the yellow line in the middle and not really, you know, you're not really succeeding and not really failing at either of them, but you're kind of turning in at the end of the day, kind of a half-assed effort. And then at one point, you know, you wake up and your kids are grown and gone and you're still here trying to do this dance. And it almost, you know, the dance itself doesn't really matter anymore because you're still
they say it's not, they say old age is not what, you know, it's the retirement analogy, you know, and I found that out when I kind of stepped back. I realized I still have to find shit to do. The worst thing in the world is, you know, again, you sit in the fucking rocking chair and then you just, again, it's, you know, fade to fucking black, you know, so to many ways, I think it's a natural drive to, you know, to be alive. So speaking of live performing, do you have any shows coming up?
I don't have anything coming up until the spring. I'm kind of saving my favors because you know, once
that's a great way to put it.
Once this record is getting ready to hatch, I'm going. You know, there's a couple of things. I'm looking at a residency at one of the shows here, in one of the clubs here in Nashville, and there's a couple of places that I've already talked to about coming to this summer and this fall. But it's hard to go ahead and start pulling the trigger on committing to shows until I know when the record's coming out and who's putting it out and you know, all of those things, because there's still a lot of possibilities, you know, floating around in the air that haven't really fully been explored yet.
Well, listen, one of the things definitively on my bucket list, and we talked about this last time, at some point, at some way, somewhere along the way, I definitely want to sit down and play with you again, get you up here maybe, you know, for a show or get down to you or something, because it's definitely been a big part of my life. So it's something I want to continue to the best of my ability. Anybody, anything you want to shout out before we roll into, I got a couple of local bands that I'm gonna do a track or two, but anything that speaks to you that you want to throw out there, anybody you want to piss off, or, you know, any particular message for the world out there that
I would just say to anybody who has actually listened to the entirety of this conversation that I appreciate you more than you will probably ever know.
Well, the beautiful thing about this will stay archived up so people can go listen to it whenever the fuck they want. It will be there until we don't have technology, we blow ourselves up or some shit like that. That's one of the reasons I do it in this particular format, unlike the radio show, like we talked about, because of the commercial licensing, it becomes just a fucking hassle. But this, nothing that's in this they can touch. You own the rights to your stuff. I own the rights to my stuff. I don't have any, you know, advertisers or, you know, any type of those, you know, structured type of things. So this literally is just, you know, again, that moment in time, everything that goes along with it, some of your, you know, music, obviously, from your new releases. So that way it's tagged in, push your algorithm out there a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Do the little things, work the system as fucking best we can. And then
I do appreciate it, man.
Oh, no, listen, it's the same analogy with the radio station. Granted, you're right. FM is not what it was, but it still makes an impact to a degree. I still have hope. I'm not ready to write it off completely like 8 tracks. You see where I'm going? Because there's still some dynamics, I think, even if just within the narrative of, again, giving a voice, because we don't just do the FM band, we stream as well too. So we've made it a point that we've incorporated the elements that we can technology wise. Granted, again, we still can't go outside the FCC, guidelines in the streaming element, but it still gives a format for a lot of bands that they're not going to get played otherwise. You mentioned it. It is the new direction that a lot of people are going is to the online element, but creating their own, be it, a podcast like what we're doing.
Well, the fact that you're doing them both makes a lot of sense because, geography would preclude me listening to a radio station in Rochester, New York, sitting in Nashville, Tennessee. So having that streaming element is definitely going to be vital.
Oh yeah, no, listen, it's the only thing really that you can do to, keep a semblance of a connection with it. But it's also, to some degrees, one of the tools that can be used to make other things happen. And this from just the logistic elements of, producing shows. We're using the radio station to create opportunities for the bands that you and I both know aren't going to get those types of opportunities. And, your analogy with Opie and stuff like that. If we don't fucking take care of each other, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? The record companies aren't going to do it. You know what I mean? Most of the bigger conglomerate elements, most of the radio stations in this country are owned by a handful of companies. You know what I mean? So we both know that they're just pushing particular narratives. It's like, here, drink the Kool-Aid.
Yep, sell that advertising.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's the, chasing the dragon, and again, we talked about it, offline. I know a few people that had just been like, yeah, no, can't do this anymore, and it doesn't translate, in the same way as well too. But it's like anything, like you said, it really depends on what your intent is. That's a beautiful thing we have being a nonprofit station. We don't have to try and drive it from, the almighty, we have to sell advertising space. We don't have, a lot of the super duper high end type of tech shit, but we also don't have, the monkey on our back either.
Well, I mean, just like everything in life, there's always a trade-off involved, man. And we are, we all are the sum total of the choices we make. So, if you're good with it, then that's the important thing. If you found a seam that you can ride that's comfortable for you and that that gives you some freedom to explore the stuff that you want to explore, that's where you belong.
Yeah, no, and listen, it has also been making a difference. It's getting some of the bands locally around here and within the area exposure. It's allowing us to put things out there like what you and I are doing. You know what I mean? It was the same analogy. Doug and I were able to have a different kind of conversation, and he commented on it. He's like, nobody ever talks to him about that type of stuff. They're always, it's that one-dimensional, Southern rock, element, and it's a lot of it fucking fluff. You know what I mean? So, just even being able to share those stories and the dynamic, again, of music that isn't going to always get the exposure it deserves. Like, you definitely deserve to have your music out there. And I know that you don't have a big record company, promoting you or doing any of this stuff. So I figured, listen, same analogy used. You fucking help me out when I need it. The least I can do is like, hey, I work at a radio station. I can at least, play it. I can bring you on my podcast and be like, hey, check out my buddy Tom. Isn't he cool? I can give something back.
Well, I mean, that's how life itself works. We're all supposed to be working that particular cycle.
Well, yeah, I mean, from your mouth to, if only we could put it in a pill and get everybody to take it. Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't it be, though?
Yeah. It'd be a wonderful life, man.
Well, remember, no man is a failure who has friends.
No, listen, it's strength in numbers. It's an old school dynamic. It keeps, to some degrees, the magic alive. Listen, again, I really appreciate you taking the time when you get close to doing something else. And we'll talk somewhere, along in between. But I definitely want to have you back again when you have some other stuff. You have any shows that are coming on, anywhere even remotely close up here in the New York area, let us know, and I'll let you know when Chris Hicks comes on. We're going to do a little bit of dancing. They're going to be up here in New York, so maybe we can find some way, get everybody together.
That would be wonderful, man.
Cool.
Definitely keep me posted.
Absolutely. Listen, best to you and the family, brother. I love you, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Wolf. I'll talk to you later, man.
So again, I want to thank my brother Tom Hampton for taking the time to come out here. Yes, the show's gone a little bit longer than it usually does, but guess what? That's the beauty of what I do. We don't have to have a restriction, and a lot of really great stories. We'll have him back again, and we'll dive deeper into some stuff. As promised, I am going to close out tonight with a couple of the local bands over here that are reflective of the genre elements that we were exploring, the country, blues, / folk, rock, because again, music has all these little variables, you know what I mean? And, you can use any number of examples, be it a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young or Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin did a lot of acoustic stuff that was influenced either by old folk or blues or Celtic elements. So this is, in my analogy, where the magic is born. So one of these, the first one we're going to do is a group of guys called the Matt Seidel Band. They were on Brother Ed Contini's show a couple of weeks ago, performed live. Really, really good people. Really cool old school sound. So this is their track, Driving in the Dark, and then we'll close it out tonight with a little something from my sister, Deb Magoni, and a little thing called It's All Right. So until next time, my brothers and sisters, know that you are loved. Try and hang in there. Enjoy the music and dance with the wolves when and where you can.
The air is charged with bliss, highways are anonymous. We could be anywhere at all. I wanna do is keep traveling with you, savoring this sacred night. And if you need to close your eyes, don't worry, I'll be fine. I don't mind driving in the darkness all around. I can hardly hear a sound except the steady humming of the tires speeding past. I hope every detail lasts. Hope I remember the colors of the sky. And if you need to close your eyes, don't worry, I'll be fine. I don't mind driving in the dark. Oh, so easy to imagine being brave. The farther I drive away, but sooner or later tomorrow's gonna come. And sure enough, I no longer can deny it's day. Street lights are fading to gray. The stars are disappearing with dawn rising to the right. The bliss has vanished with the night. The lingering moon will soon be gone. You take the wheel, say close your eyes, don't worry, I'll be fine. Drift away into a gentle dark. You rest a while, you're so tired, driving all night. I'll wake you up if we make it home.
The sun climbs up the steepest hills to shine a light